Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on creating 2D arrays in Java. In this lesson, I'll show you how to make an array of arrays, also known as a 2D array. I'll then discuss how to determine the length of a 2D array and their inner arrays, and how to access and change the elements in that array. Let's get started. Suppose we want to write a program to manage this gradebook. The gradebook is arranged such that each test is represented by a row of numbers, and each student's scores are represented as a column of numbers. Obviously, we don't want to store all these numbers separately within our program. Instead, we want to store them all together. One way to do this is to first treat each set of test scores as an array. That means the gradebook itself is a group of arrays. In other words, our gradebook data can be stored as an array of arrays, also known as a 2D array. More specifically, we would call this structure a rectangular 2D array, because the inner arrays are all the same length. My lessons will deal exclusively with rectangular 2D arrays and won't address ragged arrays, in which the inner arrays vary in length. Okay, let's write the code that creates this 2D array data structure. Just like with simple 1D arrays, there are two ways to do that. The first way is by using an array initializer. Recall, this is how you would use an array initializer to create a 1D array. To create and initialize a 2D array, we will use a very similar syntax. We first put the data type, then we put two sets of square brackets to indicate that this will be a 2D array. Then we put the name of the array followed by the assignment operator. Since a 2D array is simply an array containing multiple arrays, at this point we put two curly braces to create that outer array. But then the array elements are themselves arrays, so we need to put another set of curly braces for each inner array we want to create. I'm putting each inner array on a separate line, just to make the code more readable. Then we can fill in the inner arrays with their elements. So that's how you can create a 2D array and fill it with some initial values. The second way to create an array fills the array slots with a default value, 0 in the case of an integer array. Let's see how to do that. Recall, this is how to make a 1D array of length 6 with default initial values. To make a 2D array containing 3 arrays, each with 4 elements, we do something very similar, except we use two sets of square brackets. It's usually helpful to picture a 2D array as a table, where each inner array is a table row. In that case, we can also interpret this first number as the number of rows in the table, and the second number as the number of columns in the table. That means this line of code would create the following data structure. Now let's revisit our original 2D array and examine how it's stored in memory in greater detail. Gradebook is a reference to an array, meaning it holds an address that helps Java find the array in memory. We represent that relationship using an arrow, like this. And stored within that array are references to other arrays. It is those inner arrays that actually contain our values. And if this were a 2D array of objects, for example strings, the structure would be even more complex, with those inner arrays containing references to objects. This more accurate picture of 2D arrays is especially helpful when understanding their length property. For example, use this picture to try to predict the value of gradebook.length. So the length of the 2D array is 3, because as you can see from this picture, gradebook is indeed an array of length 3. To get the length of one of the inner arrays, we first use the bracket notation to access one of those arrays. Remember, this means we are grabbing the element at index 0 of our array. That element is itself an array. To get its length, we use a dot operator followed by the length property, like this. So we got 5 as our result because that first array, the one at index 0, does indeed have a length of 5. Again, most of the time, picturing a 2D array as a simple table is good enough for whatever we're trying to do. In terms of the table model for 2D arrays, gradebook.length tells us the number of rows in the table, while gradebook0.length tells us the number of columns. Now let's use that table model of a 2D array to understand how to access and change array elements. Suppose I want to print the value at this location in the gradebook. Notice that it's located in array number 1 and slot number 3 of that array. In other words, it's located in row 1 and column 3 of our table. So to access its value, we use 2 sets of square brackets. In the first set, we put the rows index, and in the second set, we put the columns index. Let's see if that worked. Good. Of course, we would also use this double bracket notation to change array elements. For example, this line of code changes the value in row 0 and column 2 to the value stored in row 2, column 1. Let's make sure that worked by printing the values at both locations. Good. So notice that the value at 0, 2 changed correctly, while the value at 2, 1 did not change at all. And that wraps up this lesson on creating 2D arrays in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.